Well, welcome to your English Language Paper 1 mock response materials. We're here to look at Section A and Question 4. Question 4 is a really important question. Students sometimes find this question problematic in the way that it is written and not quite sure on what the examiner is asking from you. But actually, once you have a strategy for this question, once you know how to approach it, then actually it can be really straightforward and you can pick up some marks really easily. So hopefully this will give you an idea on how to approach it, but also help you to reflect on the mock that you've just done and perhaps how you might want to improve for the next time that you do it. So look, as you can see here, question 4 begins with telling you which part of the extract to look at. This case is from line 20 to the end. Always just highlight that. I would, even if you are really aware that it is line 20 to the end, but we do strange things in the examination, just highlight that both on the question paper but on the insert itself, just so you know which part of the text you're looking at. Then it has a statement. The statement here is as follows. A student said, "This part of the story where the hyena behaves wildly is funny rather than frightening. The writer suggests that the hyena is actually no serious threat to Pi." To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your impressions of how the hyena behaves, evaluate how the writer presents the threat of the hyena to Pi, and support your response with references to the text. So, what is this question actually asking you to do? Well, it's actually asking you to evaluate. Do you agree with this statement or not? And how do you know? What evidence have you got to make your evaluation? And it has to be your evaluation. You have to come up with some sense of whether you agree with what the student said or not. Now, to distill the question further, what I would do is I would take out those key words from the question. And of course here it's funny rather than frightening. Where do you sit? Do you think the writer has written from line 20 to the end and the hyena is funny more than it is frightening? And how do you know? And if you look on the other side of the screen, you can see, can't you, the ways in which the examiner will be marking you. At a level 2, you'll be showing some attempt at evaluation. At level 3, marks 11 to 15, make a clear and relevant response to the focus of the statement. And then at the top, the key word there is perceptive. Can you see something perceptive to make your evaluation spot on? So let me take you through a bit of a method on how you can approach this question. The first thing to say about answering this question is, well, frankly, answer the question. That sounds really stupid, doesn't it? It sounds really simplistic, but you will be amazed how many students get really confused and confuddled in the exam, and actually they do not answer the question. The question essentially is, to what extent do you agree? So answer the question. Do you agree? Do you not? Do you kind of agree in some ways? Do you kind of agree in others? It's up to you. I've got my own view on this passage, but make it really clear. I always like to be really clear from the outset by using words like unquestionably I agree, unquestionably I disagree. But that really frames your answer and also helps the examiner to see how you're evaluating, and therefore will get you some marks. And the next thing to do is to find your evidence. Find your evidence to support the evaluation. You need 3, 4 pieces of evidence from the text that you can analyse, that you can unpick, that you can explain the effects for, and say why that supports your evaluation. But remember, you also, in this question, you have to talk about the writer's methods. So you talk about terminology and you talk about the effect of that terminology. So once in your head that you've got that really clear, you answer the question, you find 3 or 4 bits of evidence to support your evaluation, and then you talk about the writer's methods and the effects from those bits of evidence, then actually it's a really straightforward question. And once you've got to that point, you can find that evidence and start to plan your answer. So let me show you how I would plan my answer. I'd look through and I'd probably agree actually with this student that it is, I find this more funny than frightening, but I can understand how people can see that frightening. That's going to form part of my evaluation. So I'm going to start off by saying unquestionably I agree. Absolutely, just a one-line statement in my answer, which I'll show you later in this video. But the first thing that I'd look at is the idea that the narrator was seized by fear. And I would say, well, I can understand why people would see this as frightening if the narrator is seized by fear. That verb seized, that metaphorical verb seized, it seems to imply, it seems to amplify the notion that the narrator is overcome with fear, almost like fear, that abstract noun there, has been kind of personified. They're paralyzed by fear. They can't do anything else. So I would probably start by saying, look, I can understand how people would find this frightening. But we soon realize in this text that there's actually nothing to be afraid of with this hyena, because the hyena is ridiculous. And we see that in the sense of that imagery. It ran in circles. And that gives us the image, that ridiculous image, that comic image, that the hyena is directionless, it's thoughtless, it's perhaps a little bit ignorant, but also perhaps creates a bit of sympathy for the hyena as well, because it's confused, it's confuddled as well. But certainly that image and that notion that was running in circles, the noun circles, seems to suggest to us that actually that's actually quite funny rather than something to be terrified of. Yes, this is a predator. Yes, it's a dangerous animal, as we know from earlier on in the text. But at this point, frightening? No, this thing's running in circles, and it's clownish, and it's very, very amusing. So what else would I talk about to support my evaluation that this is funny? Well, actually, I'd use that onomatopoeia, yip, 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 yip. Did I get the yips right? Did I give one too many? But we can see that that's an onomatopoeic sound, and it's a continuous sound that is going on. And of course, that doesn't sound particularly like a predatorial sound or a sound to be frightened of. In fact, what it does, it provides us with an image of almost a small, very annoying dog. And we hear the fact that it did this all morning as well. So rather than becoming frightening, what seems to happen here with that onomatopoeia and that repetition of that word yip, that it seems to provide in the reader's head this sense that the hyena is not frightening, it's funny, it's humorous, to the point of actually being very, very annoying indeed. And the onomatopoeia used by the writer that almost kind of brings that to life, and that it helps resonate and reinforce that sense of comedy. So what would be my final point? Well, my final point there would be the idea that abruptly it vomited. And whilst again it does evoke a sense of sympathy for the hyena, it's very amusing. This thing is so ridiculous, is so clownish. That's my view here, that actually it is ran itself to a point of vomiting. It is out of control, and I think that adverb abruptly is very amusing indeed, because it's unexpected, almost creates the hyena almost like this kind of cartoon character. What it also does as well in the mind of the reader, kind of it almost makes the hyena seem quite vulnerable, almost like a young baby. Young babies kind of abruptly vomit, as I very well know with my experiences. But certainly, is that something to be terrified of? Well, no, actually, it's something to be sympathetic for. But I think that adverb abruptly, I think that is used. That is my view. It enhances and it reinforces that sense of comedy rather than that sense of fear. So that's what I do. So in my head, once I've got my notes done, I've got a clear idea about how I want to answer the question. So let me show you what an answer might look like, and hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised by how it looks. So let's go through how we might like to answer this question. I unquestionably agree with the student and see the presentation as amusing rather than frightening. So there I've done it. I've set my stall out at the start of my question 4. I'm answering the question. And now I'm going to go on to prove how I've reached that evaluation that this presentation is one that's funny rather than frightening. Pi's reactions initially are those of fear, as shown by the phrase seized with fear. The metaphorical verb seized is interesting, as it suggests the narrator is paralysed by his fear, incapable of moving nor acting. At this point, we can understand why the hyena could be viewed as frightening, However, we soon realised there is little to be fearful of as the hyena ran in circles. This provides the reader with ridiculous imagery of an animal engaging in a pointless activity, confused, disorientated and vulnerable. It certainly is not an action that induces fear, it creates great humour. So what I've done there is I've evaluated, I've said, look, I can understand why people might read this as fearful and something to be frightened of, but soon, by that imagery of the running in circles, which I've explained, and I've explained the effect on the reader, actually it is more funny than frightening. Let's see how I extend the evaluation and analysis further. Equally, the use of repetition and onomatopoeia with yip, yip, yip further amplifies the notion that the hyena is comical and humorous. Whilst we may have expected a predator, these sounds seem to resemble those of a small dog as opposed to a fearful beast. In the same way, the fact that this noise is going on all morning makes the reader see the hyena as humorously annoying rather than afraid of it. So I'm talking about the writer's methods: repetition, onomatopoeia, and then I've said the effect of it. It makes it seem humorous, make it seem like a small dog, and actually very different to our expectations. So again, the examiner would like that. Seems like a very short paragraph, but it hits all the aspects that's required for this exam. So let's see how I finish question 4. Finally, the eventual collapse of the hyena is presented as both comic and humorous. We are told that the hyena abruptly vomited. This image makes the hyena seem vulnerable, weak, and like a small child. This makes the reader both feel sympathetic for the animal, but also finds this funny. It is such a contrast to what we may have expected. Equally, the adverb abruptly further develops this idea that the hyena is out of control, confused and disorientated, like a cartoon figure we would laugh at. And unquestionably, I agree with the student. The presentation is funny. So what I've done there again is I've spoken about the writer's methods, the imagery, the adverb. I've spoken about the effects. I've used the keywords from the question, and then I've used a one-line paragraph at the end just to seal the deal, just to answer that question again. And look how at the start and at the end I've kind of what you'd call bookended the question, just to show the examiner that I'm answering the question. So look, that is one way in which you could have approached this question. There were many ways you could approach it, but what I'm hoping you're picking up is that notion and that understanding that if you have a technique, a strategy to answer this question, then it is really, really going to help you. It's a really important question. It's 1/4 of the marks for paper 1. It's 1/8 of the marks for the whole English language GCSE. You have to take it seriously, but you have to have a strategy. So look, good luck if you're responding this week, and if you've got any questions, feel free to email me. Good luck.